Welcome to another episode of Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my best friend, Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And we are also joined by Kevin Witten, a.k.a. Well Red Beard. Say hello, Kevin.
Hello, nice to see y'all.
And today we are talking to the author, John Lynch. Say hello, John.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
What got you into horror?
The earliest I can remember is probably my brother having me watch Nightmare on Elm Street when I was a kid, or maybe like over kind of like sneaking in and my mom was watching The Exorcist. It was one of those two. And both of those movies petrified me when I was like way too young to have seen them. And then just kind of ever since then, I would watch with my brother or my mom. And it kind of took off. It's always been a thing.
Brennan, why don't you go with the next question, or Kevin?
You can't throw it to two people at once. We've been through this.
Brennan, why don't you go?
Oh, thank you so much. All right. John, I want to jump right into the Warrior Retreat. Although I guess I'm really just jumping into writing in general. This book had kind of an interesting genesis in that it stopped and started, and you had a certain amount of it, and then you scrapped it, and it did a lot of things before it finally came to fruition. So I wonder if you could kind of take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I started writing the book. I want to say it was like 2020. I had been writing before that, but I hadn't been taking it too seriously because I want to say I really started writing around like 2011 or something like that. And I wrote a couple short stories and I sent them to a few markets and they got denied. And I just it wasn't for me then. I didn't want to continue because I just got down about it. And then I really picked up again in like 2020. I started writing the Warrior Retreat. I want to say I had about 20,000 or so words into it. And then it didn't feel right. So I abandoned it. And I was just writing short stories trying to sell to market at the time. And part of the reason I ended up abandoning it was because of my writing schedule. I didn't have a lot of time to write. And I still don't, but now I carve out the time. But I would be writing and I would go, like I would have like a week of productivity and then I would go like 3 weeks where I didn't write a word and I wasn't keeping good notes at all. And I'm pantsing on top of that, and I didn't have good notes on what was going on. So I would go back and I would reread the manuscript because I had no idea what was going on. And then I would look, and it was like chapter 5, chapter 5, chapter 5, and I'm like, well, that's not right. So like I said, I scrapped it. I worked on short stories for a while, and then I kind of got to the feeling like maybe I could only write short stories because every time that I tried something longer, I just couldn't get past the 10,000 word mark. I started writing another book, which actually is my current work in progress, but I started writing that and the same thing. I get to like 10,000 words on there and it was just started like feeling like it was falling apart. So I put that to the side and then I started writing a third book. And the same thing with that one. I just like, it wasn't picking up at all. And it felt disjointed. And I just started to think like, well, maybe novels and novellas aren't for me. So then last year, I noticed that a publisher was taking manuscripts. They wanted 10,000 words in the manuscript, and then they would ask you for more, if they liked the 10,000 words. I looked at the Warrior Retreat because I knew it had around 20,000, and I was like, this is horrible, absolutely awful. There's no hope for this. So I was like, and it was like a week deadline from when I saw it. So I was like, I need to get 10,000 words by the end of the week. So I sat down every single day and I rewrote it completely from scratch. I did leave, there were a couple scenes that I knew that I wanted. So I pulled those scenes up and I rewrote those too, but I knew what I wanted to happen. But the overall arc of the story completely changed. I didn't end up getting accepted for that publisher. But to be fair, I gave them less than I asked for. I sent it knowing it was going to get rejected because it didn't even have the 10,000 words. So I would have rejected it as well because it didn't meet the requirements. And then, like I had said, I had trouble getting past 10,000 words on pretty much anything that I was writing at the time. So there was no guarantee that if they accepted that I was even going to produce a finished manuscript. I wouldn't have bet on me doing it. So, it makes sense to me that a publisher wasn't going to take that bet either.
But then you did bet on you, man. So
Yeah, I did.
guess my biggest question is, it sounds like you had 3 novels going. You kept getting stuck around that same mark. So what changed on the last one? And do you feel like you cracked something that's going to help you in the future?
Yeah. So trying to make that 10,000 word limit in that week, that's what helped me crack it, because I just barely missed it. I had like 9,500 words, and I was like, okay, well, this whole time I've been feeling like I couldn't get past a certain point, and I was feeling like I didn't have time to write a longer piece of fiction because I was having long periods of breaks in between. But this whole week, I found time and time again, over and over and over, to sit down and carve out 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 45 minutes before bed. And that's just really what it was. And then I kept going with what I had because, I felt like I had momentum at that time. And I kind of told myself, well, this whole week I've been able to carve out multiple writing sessions, at least 15 to 20 minutes a piece. Sometimes I got a couple hundred words down. There'll be times where I got like 1,000 words down. So that I kind of told myself like I could do it. And then from there, I started keeping better notes. And that really helped me too. So what I would do was I would have another document right next to the one that I was writing in another tab. And this one kept a running tally of every character and the major plot points as I wrote them, because like I said, there were scenes that I knew were going to happen. I kind of knew how the story started, and I had an idea where it would end. Other than that, I only had a couple scenes that I knew that I wanted to include. So whenever I made a character, I wrote a little bit about them. Whenever they did something, I wrote kind of the important notes of that in their little character bio. And then every time that I wrote a scene in the book, I went over to my document, my note document, and I wrote a little synopsis of what happened in that scene. So that way, if I did have to go a couple days writing and get a chance to write, I'd be able to jog my memory. And also noting that it did help one time. I think it was maybe Brian Keene I saw mentioned. He does something where like he doesn't finish what he's writing when he stops. I think it was him that said that. Like he might leave off and the sentence is only partially finished. So that way, when he picks back up, he's got to finish the sentence, and it helps to jog his memory and get going again without, sitting at a blank staring at a document, wondering how to start. He's already got the start there. And, all of those things kind of helped me to realize that I could do it. I just needed to stop telling myself I didn't have time and find the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's something that, is important to you, you're going to dig that time out of your week.
Yeah.
Kevin, I really enjoyed the video review that you did on John's book, and I definitely want to throw it to you next. So the floor is yours, sir.
I saw you guys were both muted, so I tried to be a professional there, and then I started talking while I was still on mute. But first of all, congrats. One thing I mentioned in my review is that, in my 5 years of doing this, I see a lot of people that are reviewers or just readers that, throw their hat in the ring. And like I said, I'm always supportive, but sometimes I cringe a little, And I just thought, you hit it out of the park. Your writing chops were great. I think war horror is perfect. And this is, I'm not asking the question yet, but I think war horror is great. It's I'm surprised there's not more of it. There's not a lot out there in this, post 9/11 wars. I feel that they affect everyone. And everyone knows someone that was over there, and someone that was affected by it. And for me, it's like the perfect vehicle for writing horror about men. I know that soldiers aren't all men, but we get all these stories about the final girl or the girl being chased, by the axe murder or whatever. And it's just opened, like I said, a perfect vehicle to write horror about men. I love that about it. I love that it was these big badass dudes that were suffering here. And also, I think it just, because we've all experienced it or all know someone that has, it screamed of authenticity. And it just really allowed you to plumb like the depths of like PTSD and men's mental health issues in general, which, is also something that, more commonplace to be talked about now. But, I come from a generation that we didn't talk about men's mental health very much. And I guess my question is, how important was that aspect of the book? I mean, kind of really focusing on men's mental health, within this horror format.
When I first started writing it, it kind of, that aspect wasn't there. Like it was, but it wasn't affecting everybody. So the original idea for it actually was I was originally going to potentially do like a supernatural slasher. Like I had in my head, Jason Goes to Hell, but with Marine veterans. And then I was just like, it's not working. The mental aspect of it wasn't there. It felt like a disservice to people who were suffering PTSD because it just wasn't well done. And I think at the time I just wasn't good enough of a writer to do what I wanted to do. So that was another mindset. And I know, I talked with Edwin Lauren about the book on his YouTube channel, maybe like a year ago or so. And before I had started rewriting it, and I had told him, I was like, I just didn't feel like I was good enough at writing yet to write it and make it be what it needs to be and not like a mockery of that, because I tried to toe a line with making that aspect of it as real as it could be, but also playing it down in some parts, playing it up in other parts. And well, it would also be something that horror readers would want to read. Which once I figured out how to do that, it was a lot easier because I could go off of my own personal experience. And I know a lot of friends who, from being in the Marine Corps, that I still talk to, who have had those personal experiences. And everybody's not open about things, but we do talk about it with each other. So I was able to use those experiences once I was a better writer to actually be able to hopefully do it justice.
I'm gonna take over and say that I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning of the book where, and you commented on the afterward where you're talking about driving through IEDs, possibly IEDs are everywhere. So it just made me think of a few people that I knew in my life because, like Kevin said, a lot of people knew folks that went through that. I grew up with a kid that he was in the Marines. He lost both of his legs and his hand from an ID, and he eventually he was sent home and taken off life support because it just wasn't looking good. So he passed away a while ago. And there's another one where I worked with his father, and he said that his son, they were taught there's a kid in the road, you shoot him, and he said it's terrible. Just makes me sad now as a father thinking about how like he has to think about his son in this fucked up war that is in a place where he can't fly over there and see his boy if he's dying, and he has to kill these kids because they might kill them. And that's kind of where my mind went to. But I love war movies and war stories. I mean, I got a bunch of mainly Korean War and World War II, but it made me think of the movie Fury with Brad Pitt, Tank Crew. That's the kind of bond that your guys that made me think of those guys, how they're in close quarters and how there's just you gotta have something take your mind off of this reality. So they're just like saying the craziest shit to each other, and I might be jumping all over the place here, but it also made me like kind of really irritated about how the public has to know certain things about war. I'm a civilian. I never went to war, but like I said, I read a lot about it. My brother-in-law, he was a Marine in Iraq, and I have some friends that were in Iraq too. And we shouldn't know about this stuff because it's like I'm reading when I read Lone Survivor, I know that was a choice why Marcus Luttrell and his men had to make sure that they didn't kill a goat herder and his son in order to, like, they were going back and forth. If they do this, it gets back to the courts and they get court-martialed. They get this, they get everything taken away. They go to jail because of the PR effect it'll have. I know this is way beyond your book, but it just like, I want to hear from you if you want to talk about what your thoughts are on that, because for me, it's war, it's ugly, and a lot of good people die, and that's fucking terrible, but it's gonna happen. So my point is I don't think that civilians should know what the hell's going on to some extent. I don't know how to be more concise than that. I know that's a ADHD jumble. So if you can decipher any of that, go for it. If not, Brendan, take it away.
Well, so I just want to like be clear. Like, I don't advocate for like harming anybody who doesn't need to be harmed overseas. I was in the infantry, so that was part of my job. But I do think that journalism and seeing it does have a place there, because it's a double-edged sword. That yes, it makes things more dangerous, because it does make you do have to think about the rules of engagement, and those are more of a thing because of that. But I think that's a good thing too, because if things can get out of hand real quick. And if you're not thinking about the consequences of what might happen of your actions, they could get a lot out of hand a lot faster, and things could get real messy, and a lot of people could get hurt. But as far as that goes, there's also another aspect of it where I kind of disagree with journalism there, in a sense. So we had a guy who got injured, and they had to beg and plead this guy to not put these pictures on the Associated Press website, because it was literally pictures of a Marine injured after an IED strike, or actually it might have been an RPG strike, and he just wanted to put the pictures up on like Yahoo, and you could see them now, but like at the time his parents hadn't even been notified yet. And he's trying to upload these pictures to the internet. And it got to the point, I believe, where the Secretary of the Navy got involved, trying to ask this guy to just please hold off on posting these pictures until his family's been notified. So for something like that, yeah, I don't think that like the general public needs to see, their son laying on a stretcher or on the side of a truck. But as far as the hardships of war go, I do think it has its place for that to be seen, because things can get out of hand. It's just unfortunate that when we end up in wars now, we're following rules of engagement and we're following the Geneva Convention, but other countries are, and that's what makes it more dangerous. It's not the prospect of potentially getting in trouble or court-martialed if you do something wrong. Because if you do something wrong, it's the same thing with anything else. If you do something wrong, you should get in trouble for that, because it doesn't have a place. But it is the fact that when we do go to combat, there are times when people are utilizing women and children to safeguard themselves or hide themselves, or they're literally using them as a weapon. And then that's when it becomes like, okay, what do I do now? In that situation.
I would think that the benefits of having the common American person see the reality of war would outweigh the negatives in most cases. Now, to give some context, I mean, Luttrell was very anti-liberal media in that book. I mean, very much so, and I get it. But I mean, as a left-leaning individual, I mean, it got to the point where, I mean, like the first time I ignored it, second time, third time, ignored it. It got to the point, I mean, he was all about, against the liberal media, whatever. But for him, I guess, like, some news, I guess, announced his death, before it was actually confirmed, of course. And I think that was where a lot of the negativity came from. But, that book does, speak out against that stuff very, very heavily. So I see where Pat's I guess opinion on that is coming from. But yeah, I would think that the benefits would far outweigh. But again, I don't know how much it has to do with with the the warrior retreat. But I mean, I think the great thing about war horror, and I don't want to jump in line, but it's just another like comment I had really, and maybe you can just comment on it. But is that it allows you to set up the I guess the situation, the adversity or whatever, kind of easily, right? Like if you're trying to build a troubled character, I mean, you can go into detail about a rough childhood or an abusive father, or you can say, that motherfucker went to war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it allows you to kind of skip a lot of buildup and say, I've got a troubled character, and this is why. And I mean, I don't know if you want to comment on that or whatever, but
yeah. So I thought it gives it a different aspect because it's not something that you're seeing as much. Like you said, it's another trauma. It is a trope, but it's much less used, and two different people might experience two different things in a war, and you could have one guy whose his trauma might have been he's been involved in multiple explosions, and you might have another guy who his trauma came more from just being separated away from everybody and not being around everybody, in that, the people that love him in that environment. And there's a lot of different things that traumatize people different ways in war. And if me and you went to war together, you might see something that doesn't bother you at all. And it might have me like second guessing, what are we even doing? So there's a lot of different ways you can play that, and I think it does allow you to explore different avenues of trauma, that you're not going to experience in another subgenre.
right.
I just want to point out real quick, and then Brendan, it looked like you had a question. Kevin, I like how you pointed out how there's for women final girl, but for men war has a certain aspect, and I agree. I'm wondering what that term is. I'm not asking for anyone to say one because it seems like it would just come organically, but I just want to comment on how neat of an observation that was.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, we don't get to see these strong, highly trained individuals put into, scary situations that often. And that's to me was, a super original aspect. I mean, I think we probably, I mean, if we, looked deep, there's probably some Vietnam horror stories there, but I just don't know that anybody's really doing it about these post 9/11 wars. And, so to me that, and again, because anybody that I knew in Vietnam is dead now, I mean, but I have, you know, a friend that was in Iraq and his truck was hit by an IED and he argued with his buddy that morning about who was going to drive. And the driver and he lost. The other kid drove. He was killed. My buddy walked away. And I mean that's a I mean I'm talking my best friend in this world. I mean by a flip of a coin, he lived and the other guy didn't. And I mean, again, he was a high school principal. That's another thing I didn't really understand is how, we use so many reserves in those wars. But for me, it framed everything. I mean, when 9/11 happened, I was 25 years old, roughly. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I cannot tell you if I voted before that point. I mean, it framed everything about the way I think about politics, the way I think about war, all because my friend went, and so I think again, it's just so important to everyone that knows someone, but I'm getting repetitive, but yeah. So I mean, but the idea of taking a big, strong, highly trained guy and making him, kind of the one that's in trouble, in a horror way. I mean, that's just cool,
Reminds me of echoes of like Peter Straub's Coco, Vietnam War. Kevin, I'm not being a smart ass, but I agreed with you. But then I thought about it. Vietnam vets would definitely still be alive. There's still Korean War vets alive. I don't know about World War II though. Korean War vets would be 80s now.
I mean, I understand that. All I'm saying is that I don't have any personal friends or family members, and there are fewer around. You know,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah, for sure, for
I mean,
sure.
my wife's uncle was there, and he lost like 6 feet of intestine because of Agent Orange poisoning,
Ooh.
and he's not with us anymore. I'm just saying that there's not. I mean, look, I mean, 10 years from now, I'm saying that generation is not gone, but I think you get what I'm saying. I mean, the Vietnam. I mean, I'm 46 years old, and I wasn't alive during Vietnam. So it's all stories to me. The Vietnam War didn't affect me, and I'm the oldest guy in this room, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
By probably about 10 years. So, and the Vietnam War didn't affect me, right?
I got
mean,
you.
so, but anyway.
Went over my head. I understand now.
Yeah, the biggest way that it's affected me is just my brother used to watch Full Metal Jacket all the time, but
That's a
only
good
until
movie.
the end of the boot camp part. And then as soon as boot camp was finished, he'd turn it off. He's like, "We're not watching the rest of this movie." And that was like the most that I know about Vietnam was, aside from books, I don't know anybody who's fought in that war personally.
Right.
I would I'd take the opportunity to triple down on what Kevin and Patrick have been passing back and forth. The whole idea of when I finished this book a few months ago, I remember really just being pleasantly surprised at the amount of humanity in it, and I think that goes back to Kevin's point about this is a type of character study that we're not generally privy to. I mean, this is my opinion only, but a lot of times when I think of military fiction, I get this kind of idea of like rah rah, go America, macho tough guys just with gun fetishes. And the biggest selling point I can say to anybody who's on the fence about this book is it's not that. It's a horror book, and it just so happens to focus on the military, but it's got an astounding amount of humanity to it, and it's a lot. It sounds so like diminishing, John, to say that it surprised me just how much you did with this book, but man, it's there's just so much in there, and I think I don't want to put words in Kevin's mouth, but like same thing. Like I read through this, I said, this motherfucker can write. Like this motherfucker can put a book together that really just kind of like hits you in the emotions and ties everything together. And I just loved it. But I'm gonna turn tack to a little bit more nuts and bolts here. Kevin also mentioned authenticity, and there is that. There is just no doubt that your experience has informed this book. But one thing that it really does well is it mixes jargon, weapons names, just the way that military people talk to each other, but it does it in a way that you don't feel lost and you don't feel talked down to. So I do wonder what kind of considerations you made when framing that language, and what recommendations you might make to both people, maybe ex-military who are looking to write, and non-ex-military who are looking to tell military stories.
So I would say when I first started writing stories, they did include military. I've always used the jargon, but I think I went too heavy on it. And I don't like to the point where if you didn't know what it was, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. So, and my wife had mentioned that to me before, that with the jargon in there, if you don't know what that is, it might go over your head. So with this, what I was trying to do was I was just trying to write it in a way that the prose around what was happening, the context clues would let you know what I was talking about if you wouldn't, like if I was talking about something about like an M203, that's the grenade launcher attachment for an M4 and M16. And without having to like you said, explain that to you like you're clueless, I just tried to frame it into a way so that way it was obvious that I was talking about a grenade launcher when I mentioned it, either before or after I mentioned it. And I just tried not to go too heavy with it. But like I said, at the same time, give a little bit. I tried to rely on the action. Using the actions makes it easier I would say to do that, because now I don't have to tell you the M203, which is a grenade launcher. I can tell you, he racked the M203, and shot a grenade from it, and that will explain to you. That will explain to you right there. Well, it's a grenade launcher, obviously, without literally telling you with a grenade launcher or an explosive round launcher. It's not literally a grenade, but it would give you the idea without beating it over your head.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the way to go, is just to find ways that you can again convey that authenticity, because the characters are going to be speaking in that. They're not going to call it the grenade launcher, they're going to call it by its designation. But to also kind of just frame it in that way where, like you said, we don't want to beat people over the head with it, because then it really does very quickly become condescending, and I don't want to read this guy because he's treating me like I'm an absolute idiot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, it goes back to like showing versus telling too. It's the same thing. I can tell you what it is, or I can just have a character do the action or use the piece of equipment or whatever it is, and then you're like, oh, that's what that is. Because you're gonna, if I have them doing something with it, it's gonna be obvious what it is, versus me just telling you over and over. And it took a little while to get that. It took a little while to get a mix. I think there is a good mix. If it's just constant that, then it's not going to be for anybody besides somebody who's in the military if you just keep doing it over and over. But you can throw it in there with the actions, and I think people. I mean, the people that I've spoken to have gotten it. I haven't really had too many people, or nobody really I can say, or maybe they've felt that way but haven't told me that the things went over their head, or they didn't know what I was talking about. So I think I got it, but I'm sure there's some people who it was just too much for also.
How's the reception been so far with Warriors Retreat?
A lot better than I had hoped, to be honest. I remember talking with my editor, Patrick Harrison, and I was just not knowing. I was like, I don't know who this book is for now. I was like, I told him, I was like, I don't know if I should call it horror or military horror or extreme horror or splatterpunk, because I feel like if I market it to any one of those people that are fans of that, then it's not going to be for them, and then they're going to get upset like I told them something that it wasn't. But it's been really good. It's been reviewing well. It's at 60 something ratings on Amazon, not on Amazon, on Goodreads right now. And it's still sitting right just under like 4.5 the last time I checked. It was close to 5 for a while, but you know what? That was like a lot of early reviews, and then as you see people start reading it on Amazon and rating it on Goodreads, it goes down from that point. But it's hovered mostly around 4.5, and it has over 50 reviews now on Goodreads. It's like 60 something, and Amazon is like approaching 50, and it's still like a 4.4 there. So. And I've had a lot of people reach out to tell me that they don't read anything military fiction at all, and they really liked it. And then I've had people who were in the military reach out and tell me that they really liked it as well. And I work with a bunch of guys who don't read that often, but they bought the book out of support. And then afterwards, they were like, "Well, I don't read it all, but I really like this book. I thought it was really good." So I've been really happy with the way it's been received. It's definitely being received far better than I thought it would be. And not that I thought it was a bad book. I didn't know who the audience was, so I was unsure how it was going to be received because of that.
Patrick C. Harrison, he's a very good editor. I've recommended him before for work. Me and Brian have read quite a few books by him. He does a good job. He
does a great job. I highly recommend him. He does a great job.
Yeah. But Brennan nailed the head. Wow, I don't know that phrase.
I did nail the head.
On the head.
Mm.
He nailed it on the head.
Who did I nail on the head?
Fuck. Your core is humanity. It's about the people. And I think that's what's gonna get your readers, man, because once you got someone that cares about your character, I'm not telling you all anything new, but once you got your hooks in a character, you'll probably watch him go through anything. Ray's arc, evolution, whatever you want to call it, was really sad. I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to be spoiling nothing, but oh man, nope. I was gonna say a book it reminded me of. It's a popular book, but that would spoil yours. So I'm gonna say, Kevin, take over. I am drowning.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. I mean, to the humanity thing, you know, I mean, even for the other side, right? I mean, I look back through my little places I marked before I came on here. I think my favorite paragraph in the book is the no atheists and foxholes part, right? You've got one paragraph in there that talks about that. And it said Ray had been a non-believer right up until he applied a tourniquet on his own leg. But basically, you know, it goes on and says he spoke to that higher power now, praying for the safety of his brothers and the death of his enemies who prayed for the same thing, but spoke to a different God. I love that part. I love even, you know, you even had humanity in there for the other side. Questions. I don't know if I really have any more. I mean, is it too early to talk about what you're working on next? I mean,
No, we can talk about that. So I just last month released my short story collection that came out in January. I know you weren't really online at that point, probably when it came out. So I don't know if you saw that. That came out in January. I am working on another full length book. I'm calling it the Senior Cruise right now. I might call it the Senior Slaughter, something to that effect. But in a nutshell, it's a teen horror. It's not YA, obviously. I don't consider myself to be a YA writer. It's just the characters are, you know, there's some adults in it, but it's mostly teens. And it's gonna just, you know, it's gonna be about something goes very wrong at the beginning of the book, and then a lot of people are going to get killed because of that.
Hence the slaughter.
Yeah. So the slaughter, that's where the slaughter comes in. I just crossed like 14,000 words in it right now. That was the one when I mentioned earlier, the second book that I started to write that I also abandoned. I had about 10,000 words, I think, in it. Again, I started rewriting it completely from scratch. Because I've noticed what I do this too. I begin a book and I start over and I keep writing and then I start over. And by that point, the plot points that were giving me problem before, I've either completely scrapped them or I've been sitting there and I've figured out in my mind how to fix that problem and where I can go from there. And it's been a little bit easier, like I said, now that I'm taking notes and leaving them up in a separate document on the side, so I can still pants, but I don't kind of lose sight of who the characters are. Because there's been times when I've had to go like a week without writing. January was a rough month overall. I got almost no writing done. Just had a lot of family medical issues, so I didn't really write it all. Keeping those notes allowed me to just pick it right back up. I don't have any kind of plans for when I'm going to release it, other than I would like to have it out by the middle of the summer. Like I want it out no later than late July, early August.
So not war related at all.
No, this one's not going to be war related. There are the collection has a couple military themed stories in it. You read one of them. It was also in We Are Providence. That story's in my collection. There's another one where it's Marines on a training mission. That's in there. I have a short story where it's just two Marines on base, but they're not really on a training mission. They're just kind of bad stuff happens on the base while they're just kind of trying to do what all good Marines do and do the opposite of what they're told and have some fun. But no, I don't want to only do war related stuff because I don't want to be pigeonholed into that. And I feel like I was able to write the Warrior Retreat how I wanted to write it, but I also don't know how to follow that up completely without it being compared directly to that, because some of the things that you guys are saying that you liked about it, like the characterization and the humanity, I don't know how to do that again. So I know I have some ideas for more war stuff, but I'm just gonna let them kind of simmer on the side until they're fully fleshed in my head. The next idea that I write that is war related, I think is going to be I'm going to turn that story Blood in the Sand eventually into a book. There's more there, and I kind of know what it is. I already know the characters like that. That's a fourth book I didn't mention, but I already started doing that. I just abandoned it when I wanted to start writing the Warrior Retreat from scratch again. But I already know the general idea of it.
I don't think I've ever done this before, but I don't even want to. I've got a request, but I'll save that for later offline. But I've got a request.
Okay.
I wonder if it's the same request. Oh, never mind. I'm thinking of a story I read that you haven't gotten to yet. Never mind.
What can I mean, I can say that here, right? I mean, I can just.
Yeah, we
Look,
can. You can always just cut it.
My kid, has got me into working out constantly, but he's got me into David Goggins, which has gotten me into which is what got me back to reading the Marcus Luttrell book. I love stories about people that do shit that I can't do or that I never will do. I think it's why I love mountain climbing stories. Like I've probably watched every documentary of the Alex Honnold stuff, Free Solo. I don't know if you haven't watched that, watch it. I mean, it's about this guy that climbed out El Capitan with no ropes.
Fuck that.
I love, like stories about Navy SEAL training. I mean, I understand in your case it would be Marine, but man, a horror story that takes place in like Marine training, Marine boot camp or whatever. I mean, because it just intrigues me. I mean, guys doing really, really hard stuff and then throw a horror. I mean, I don't know, maybe a guy that didn't make it comes back, but that shit really intrigues me. But anyway.
What if you write a short story about Marines watching the filming of Kubrick, like while he's filming it, and it's on an active base, and I don't know, just take it from there. And it's not like an asshole. Hey, you write books? Why don't you write this?
It's funny that Kevin mentioned the boot camp thing, because I have this thing that I do. Because if you pay attention to me online at all, Bentley Little is one of my favorite authors. So I always come up with an idea. I'm like, what if it's this, but Bentley Little wrote it? I was just thinking the other day, like, what if I did a story where guys are in boot camp? How would Bentley Little do that? But then I would just be way gorier than he would write.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about that literally like 2 weeks ago. I started getting the ideas, just not ideas for like a full fleshed out book, but scenes of what I would do if I were to write something where boot camp is involved.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably going to happen at some point. It's just I have a list I've been keeping, and then I lose it and then I have to find it again. But I sat down and I wrote, and I have like 10 different ideas that I think could be book length ideas. Then I lost that piece of paper and I had to start writing them down again. But that was one of them. Yeah, I my wife could tell you I lose everything. If it's not attached to me, I'm losing it.
My wife is sitting in the room listening to this right now, and we'll go to IKEA and go through the store area and mark our list of everything we're going to then go down to the warehouse portion and buy, and then lose the list. But,
that's why she's the professor. Yeah, you're just a wellish red beard.
That's right, she's the professor. Well, we talked about this war horror stuff being perfect to put men in horror situations. I mean, your day job would allow for stories kind of like that too. I mean, I can't think of two other perfect horror subgenres to put strong men in scary situations than war and your day job. You ever think about that?
Yeah, that was the third idea that I abandoned. And I have about 8,000 words in a story of that.
John's or like in general, like a normal civilian day job?
No, John's
my job. Yeah, my job.
Are you comfortable talking about it?
I don't really care. I mean, people are gonna. I don't say that I don't work there. Not even people will think whatever they think about that. But yeah, I work in a prison.
I'm a correctional officer. You're CO?
Yeah, I'm a correctional officer. So I have ideas for how I would do that. You know what I mean? Again, the genesis of that idea was, what if the University by Bentley Little, but in a prison? That's how I started thinking about that.
Yeah.
And I think that would actually work. I think that could work. I know exactly how it could work. It's just writing it. But also, because it is my day job, I need to make sure that I don't write anything real that's happened, on
Right.
whether it be, involving an employee or somebody who's incarcerated, because it's not my place to put any of those people's stories in a book, fiction or not. So I'm not going to do that. I could easily take my experiences and turn into things, but I just need to make sure that I don't write about anything that I have actually, physically seen or witnessed, or put anybody's private information out there. Like I said, whether it's somebody who works there, an employee, or somebody who's been incarcerated, because it's not really, it's privacy matter. And so I need to make sure it's not where I work. It's not anybody that I really know. It's not based off of real people. But
Right.
it's like you said, yeah. You could do that if you knew how those places ran. Just I know like what being in the Marine Corps is like, so I can do that. I know how those places are ran, so I could see how things can be horrific from an employee's perspective and an inmate's perspective, like the things that would be terrible. And that, I think, in any situation, is what makes horror really scary, when you take something real and you amplify the parts of it that are terrible, and you can really just go from there. You just take something real, and what is the worst thing that can happen in the situation, and a lot of times that'll give you something awful right there.
Right. It's fertile ground, I would think, for ideas. And I also think,
Oh yeah.
one thing you told me about your book when we talked about it was that, the funny thing about writing, like, these combat scenes, is that the shit that feels unbelievable is the real shit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the shit.
Yep.
And I feel that, prison would probably be a lot the same. The stuff that
Yeah.
feels unbelievable is the real stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, just with both of those things, I could tell you guys 100 different stories, and you'd be like, "That didn't really happen." And I'd be like, "No, if I would tell you 5 stories and tell you to pick out the fake one would probably be the one that you picked to be fake would be the real one, because
Right.
it's just, it's not normal. War is not normal. Being in combat's not normal. Working in a prison is not normal. Being incarcerated is not normal. So it's things when you tell somebody who doesn't have those kind of experiences, they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" And the same thing with the dialogue too. That applied to the action scenes, but like the banter between the guys in the truck, that was a real story. I mean, I don't want to give away like the dialogue in there, but the sergeant at the beginning who's talking about working out in the gym, and if certain things are gonna kind of lower his ability to work out in the gym. That was an actual real conversation that somebody in charge of me was having with somebody else in the truck at that time. Um, the story that you might have been talking about earlier, Brennan, from the book, I think it was it was Butcher of Bridgeport.
Mm.
When the guy's walking around to the rooms because they kind of set him up. That is a real story that my friend Josh told me. In front of our photographer. I got married a while back, and I ended up getting a divorce. But during that time, getting ready for the marriage, my friend Josh told me that story. Never told me it while we were in the Marine Corps. He told me that story while the photographer was like in the room taking pictures, and I'm like, dude, you can't say that in front of her. Like, this is not the time for that story. And he's just like, he's my friend Josh. He'll just say whatever's in his mind at that time, and that was real. That story made it into my story. So I take a lot of like real stories and crank them up a little bit with my writing, especially with the dialogue. A lot of the stuff that you think is just nobody talks like that or nobody would do that. That seems just juvenile. It probably happened, or it didn't happen to me. Maybe I didn't do it, but like it's a story from one of my friends that I know about.
So
So
I got a question with like being a CEO, going to war. That's gonna take a toll. It's gonna rip pieces out of you. How do you personally find peace?
I try to whenever I'm home, I try to just be with my family, and talk to them. My wife and kids are great. So that helps. They're all very supportive of me writing, and they're just supportive of me in general about me doing the things that make me feel happy. That's the biggest thing for me is I try not to, and it's hard. Sometimes you do. It's like anything else. You try not to let those things affect your personal life, but it really helps to not be bothered when you have um, a wife and kids who are just great and support you.
Yeah, that's perfect. I don't really know what else to add to that. Brennan or Kevin, do either of you have anything to add to that? If not, we can jump to currently reading.
I want to throw one more thing out, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
John, one thing that I've heard you talk about is initially you wanted to release the collection first and then get down to writing a novel, and you decided to novel first and then collection after. And I'm wondering, what was kind of the impetus behind that? How is that working out at this point? Collection's only been out so long. And anything else you want to share to self-publishing potential people about self-promo that you've learned in your time?
Okay, yeah. So as far as why I decided to release the collection after the book, the collection has been ready for in its current form, other than having some stories re-edited, and then getting the ones that weren't edited yet edited by Patrick Harrison. The book has been largely complete since last year, since before the Warrior Retreat was. But I had spoken before, conversations that I had in the past with Ken McKinley, 2-3 years ago, maybe, when I was just talking, about writing in general. And he had said, he thought it was a good idea to have a book out before a collection, just because it seems like people are more likely to try your collection if they like your writing, which I didn't think that, you know what I mean? Like I actually really don't like reading short stories that much. I'll read them, but I prefer to read novels. But if I'm not sure, like what a Brandon LaFaro book reads like, I might check out your collection first.
Speaking of,
just to see if I like your writing. Yeah, to see if I like your writing. But I guess what people who've been in the industry longer than I have, or have been around it, and other writers, I've spoken to other writers and collections in general. I guess this is just a generalization. You can always find an exception to the rule, but they don't seem to do as well as books do. And from what I've heard from other writers and what I've spoken to, they've usually have said, their collections don't do as well as their books do. And they felt you're giving yourself a better chance to have that collection find its readers if you have something else that they've already liked. I don't know if that's true. I can tell you that it's only been a month since the collections come out, but right now I don't feel like the book has led into more people picking up the collection, other than on my website. On my website, I did sell a combo package where I sold both books, a bunch of stickers and a bookmark, for $3 less than it would have cost you to buy both of the books. So I just took I took the combined price of the books minus $3 from it and threw in a bunch of stickers and a coaster and a bookmark. And I felt, that gave it enough of a value that people who really didn't want to check out the collection checked it out. So as far as readers buying it from my website, that's done okay. As far as Amazon and reception, it's only been a month. People that have read it seem to like it, but I have not noticed a benefit yet. But I will say that the Warrior Retreat only came out in November, and people are just now starting to find it, so that could also play it. I've only have 2 books, and and my first one just came out in November, so I don't think it's really a realistic expectation for me to even say at this moment that my book will lead to people picking up the collection, or it would have been better to do the collection first. Because I'm just at the point now where a lot of people have recently read it in the last month or the last few weeks or so, and I don't necessarily think it's a realistic expectation for them to go like, you know what, I'm going to pick up this collection and read it right now. Now that I just read this book, because I don't do that. I don't read like that. You know, if you have 10 books, I'm not going to read all 10 of your books back to back. I'm going to read one of your books, and if I liked it, I'll probably buy the other one, or I'll read it in a couple months from now. But I don't want to just burn through your entire bibliography in like a month. I don't read like that. I don't know how much other people do. As
I don't
far as
think
self-publishing,
I don't think many people read like that, man.
yeah, I don't think it's just like, because for me, I just feel like if you have a bunch of books out and I read them all in 1 month, now I'm waiting, depending on how often you release books, I'm waiting a year, 2 years for your next one to come out. I would rather space it out and, you know, enjoy them over time. And then to your second part of the question, Brennan, as far as like self-publishing and promoting, the biggest thing that I've noticed, don't be afraid to promote yourself and talk about yourself. Don't be kind of like trashy about it. You know, don't jump on somebody else's post and be like, oh, by the way, you could read my book. You know, like if you have a post on your Facebook about your book, I'm not going to jump in your comments with a link to my book. You know, that's trashy. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to talk about my book, to link it in groups, in, you know, Facebook groups, or to talk about it on Twitter, or to link it every once in a while. Because I think a lot of people, what I've seen a lot of times online, is that people have a book, or they'll have something coming out, and they don't feel comfortable talking about themselves or talking about the book or promoting it, because they feel like maybe they just don't like talking about themselves, or they feel like they're kind of forcing it on a reader. But I look at it this way: if you don't promote your own book, nobody else is going to, unless you find a reader who will. You know, readers, word of mouth is the best way to get knowledge of your book out there. You know, if somebody enjoys it and they spread it. You know, like for me, I think the biggest thing recently is TikTok videos. I've had a reviewer make multiple videos on my on her TikTok about my book, about the Warrior Retreat. So I've noticed a direct uptick in page reads on Kindle Unlimited and some sales of the book then. So word of mouth from reviewers and readers is probably the number one thing. But I would say the number two thing is you have to give up the unwillingness to talk about your own work to people. I don't like talking about myself at all, but I will present my book to you. I'll just make sure that I don't do it in a manner that looks like I'm being like grimy about it. I'm not gonna slide into your DMs like without knowing who you are, and like you know, we all have joked before about the Goodreads reviews, the Pumpkin Farmer book or whatever it is. Every time you see a review, that guy is talking about the Pumpkin Farmer, and the
That
comments
motherfucker finally got me
with it.
last year. Brennan's like, oh, I know him. I'm like, I'm blocking
Yeah,
him.
yeah. Everybody
Came out of
knows who he is
nowhere.
because he would just, yeah, he came out of nowhere, and he would jump into the comments on everything on Goodreads, and everybody knows who that guy is because that. And I don't think that probably sold him a single book or got him a single page read. But I think that's the second biggest thing, especially for self-publishing, because nobody besides readers are going to talk about your book if you won't. I don't think my personal experience with actual advertisements, they didn't do anything for me. I set a small budget on Amazon and on Facebook to run some ads. Those didn't work at all. So I'm just not going to do that. I've talked with some other authors and publishers who've recommended just sending books to people is a better way to spend your, the $5 of postage than spending $10 on an ad. Like I'm not even kidding when I tell you I had like the metrics on my Amazon ad were like 50,000 impressions or something like that, and only like 2 clicks. So it was just a gigantic waste of money.
I've heard that from more people than you, that the Amazon ads are, just useless.
And it makes sense when you think about it, because I've talked to other authors and it might have been Duncan Ralston I was talking to, and he's just like, well, think about it. How many times have you clicked read now on the Amazon, on the lock screen ad in their Kindle? And I was like, only accidentally if I was trying to swipe to turn it on.
There's your
I've
two.
never once actually. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. It was just out of those thousands of people that were trying to turn their Kindle on, two of them accidentally hit read now. So that's been it. Word of mouth, I think, is the most important thing. Your willingness to talk about yourself. You have to talk about your book, to put the word out there in front of people, because there's a lot of people who. And another thing about it too, I know I'm going like in a million different tangents as far as, but when you talk about impressions, right? If you look on social media, if you look at how many views you have on a tweet or on a Facebook post or on a TikTok, I don't have a lot of followers. I think I have like 1,900 followers on Twitter. But if I look at a tweet, I might see that it had like 75 people saw the tweet of my book, of the link to my book. So 75 people out of 1,900. So don't be afraid to link your book over and over again, because there's a good chance that 90% of the people who follow you didn't even see it the first 10 times that you linked it.
Yeah. You are totally right. And I try to convince myself of the same thing pretty regularly, is that if I am posting about my book, that there's a fair chance that people are missing it, especially with the algorithms, what they are these days.
Yeah.
And, I'm probably not annoying people quite as much as I feel like I am, or maybe I am, and I just shouldn't care. But either way,
I would say both of those things. I would say both. You're probably not. You're probably not annoying people the way that you think you are, and you're probably not even seeing it. It's just whatever is going on right now. Nobody's seeing each other's. Like, there's people that I follow on social media for years, and I just don't see their things anymore. And then like, I'll be like, oh my God, like, I'll tell you right now, I talked to John Bender I used to talk to him all the time on Twitter. He's on Twitter. He's on TikTok. I never see him anymore on there, even though I know he's still on. If I go and search for him, I'll find that he might have tweeted 10 times today, but it's never showing me his tweets.
I hate it because
And
the new algorithms show me all the shit that people I would never talk to, man. Like, I don't understand it. And it did happen after Elon Musk took over. So I blame whatever the fuck he did, because before that, I'd see my friends on my feed, and that's just a whole mess of shit that I don't want to see.
Yeah. And all those social media platforms reset their algorithms too. So that's the thing too. Like, if you're not constantly interacting with people, eventually they're going to fall through the cracks. So I know I've said it a couple times, but I think other than people spreading the word about your book, you spreading the word about your book is the most important thing for a self-published author to do. And keep writing. That's the thing too. You can write one great book, but if you don't ever write anything else, especially self-publishing, unless you get lucky and a bunch of people find it, you're not going to have a catalog to filter people in with. And that's another thing when you ask me about the collection, that I think is I just don't have enough being self-published, and most people don't know who I am still. And I think when I have 5, 6, 7 books out there, and somebody finds one of them, that leads to them checking out the other ones. And it's just, it's a matter of self-promotion, talking about yourself, and just continuing to write. And if that first book doesn't sell, or that second book doesn't sell, that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that you haven't found the readers yet. You haven't found your audience yet. But if you keep writing, if your writing is good, you will find it eventually.
Absolutely. Totally right. All right. I want to take us into kind of our wrap-up series. So, John, what are you currently reading?
Oh, I actually just finished Decimated Dreams. I haven't written a review on it yet, but I love it.
That's good.
I think so. I have read Slattery Falls, obviously, and I read Noose, and I really enjoyed them both. But I think that Decimated Dreams is the best thing that you've written so far.
Appreciate that, man.
It's just a great book. It's really, I think it's a great book. To me, you captured the feeling of like, having heart, and the feeling of the relationship between your characters, and the loss, and trying to do anything to get through that loss, and to come out of the other side, and not lose your loved ones. And I thought it was a great book. It's what you expect of a book. Every book of a writer, you expect every writer's book to be better than the one before it, because they're growing as a writer, and that's what I see there. I think it's the best piece of fiction you've written so far, and I'm excited for the conclusion of it. I'm also reading. I'm reading Talia 2 by Daniel J. Volpe. That one's really good too. If you're a fan of his writing, then I think you're gonna like it. Um, it's very much what you expect from a Daniel J. Volpe book. I'll leave it at that. But
That's
I think
enough.
it's really good. Yeah, it's what you would expect. And it's good. I like it more than Talia. And a lot of people I like Talia. A lot of people really like that book, and so far I do think it's a much better book. I'm about halfway through that. I'm also reading. I'm reading John Durgan's new book, Inside the Devil's Nest. I'm about 25% through that. What I'm having right now is that primarily most of my reading is done with paperbacks. And I'm reading his book on Kindle because I'm tired at the end of the night. A lot of time I get home from work and I'm tired. I try to read my Kindle, but a lot during my normal work day it's like 14 hours, and I'll come home and I'll be up with my wife for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we go to bed and I'll read a little bit in bed before I fall asleep. But I've just been tired lately, so I'm just kind of falling asleep before and only reading like a chapter at a time. But John Durgan's book, Inside the Devil's Nest, that's really good so far. I'm really enjoying that. And I'm also reading Summer Never Ends by Judith Sonnet. And so far I'm really liking that one too.
Excellent.
And then, sorry to keep saying that, I'm reading like a million things at once. Sometimes I'll read one thing, and then another time I'll be reading like 10 books. I'm really excited. I just got an ARC copy of Bentley Little's new book, The DMV. So this is like a dream come true for me that I got an ARC of a Bentley Little book. It's like childhood me is like, you get his book and it's not even out yet. So I'm really excited to dig into that one.
Yeah. And you know what, man, like, don't even apologize for, listing off everything, because it's like you just finished talking about word of mouth. And if we can, encourage people to grab more Volpe, to pick something up by Judith, like, absolutely. Yep. Let's spread that.
And they're both great. I think you have to be into extreme horror and splatterpunk. If you're not into it, you're not going to like their writing. You're not going to like the subject matter, but if you like those books, if you like that kind of book, you're gonna love it, because I think they're two of the biggest names right now. I think they're newer authors, but I think that they're both consistently putting out good work. And Judith Sonnet is writing at a crazy pace. I feel like she has a new book out like every couple months, so it's so hard to keep up. And like I said, I don't want to read them all back to back to back. But I feel like I'm just like drowning in books right now. And there's just, I am drowning in books right now. There's so many books. That's the thing too about not being afraid to talk about yourself. There's so many books. You have to talk about the ones that you like or the ones that you're writing, because there's just so much to read out there. So, yeah.
Kevin, how about you?
What am I reading currently?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not right now, but I have. My wife was reading. I missed "Tender as the Flesh" by Baz Tarika. Is that what you said? Baz Tarika. I know a lot of people read that. Like, that made the rounds in the horror circle for sure. I missed it completely. I think it was probably a little bit more widely published than what I usually read, but she was reading it, and it's definitely horror adjacent. I know that, so I thought I would read that and we could converse about it. But that's really it. Right now, like I said, I'm kind of on a break. I tend to do that. I tend to read 15, 20 books in a month, and then do that for 3 or 4 months and then take a break. So right now I'm kind of on a pause. I was right in the middle of Brenda Tolian's short story collection. I think it's called Blood Mountain. That's really good. Crazy well written. I really was enjoying that one. I was also also recently finished. What did I just recently finish? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank, but that Brenda Tolian book is really good. That's I believe it was Raw Dog Screaming Press put that out. Danielle Sarah did it had a beautiful Danielle Sarah cover on it. But yeah, that's really it. I'm not currently reading, but I'm gonna get back to it soon. So
Patrick.
So actually, that's what I guys before we start recording. I finished John's Warrior Retreat for a few hours before the episode started. I want to dive into this not tonight, but tomorrow. Small Mercies by it's upcoming Dennis Lehan.
Nope.
That is how you say it. I've listened to interviews. That is how you fucking say his last name, unless he corrects me. Dennis Lehan. Dennis Lehane. You know what? I gotta look at more interviews now. But I'm gonna stick with Lehan for now. Anyways, yeah, it's his upcoming book, comes out in a couple months. That and skimming through True Grit. Well, not skimming. I'm reading a few pages as much as I can. I get too sleepy sometimes, so I just go to sleep instead of reading a few pages. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. What are you currently reading, Brennan LaFargo?
I like the part in True Grit when Matty Ross drives off into the sunset at the end and narrowly avoids running into a tree.
That's an inside joke that pretty much no one will get. But I'm not going to cut it.
That's all that matters.
That's all right. From a show that has one episode on it, and that's not the one that's public anymore.
It's true. I am reading The Donut Legion by Joe Lansdale. Comes out next month, and I'm only like 40 pages into it, but it's and I don't even want to spoil like what happens in the first 6 pages, but it's got such a great hook of a first chapter. You just get to the end of that, first series of pages, and you're like, geez, I got to know more. What is going on? And then, of course, there's just the dialogue is a masterclass, like every book he writes. The interactions between the two brothers at the heart of the book. It's Lansdale. It's going to be good.
I have a confession to make.
How the fuck did you get that
Lansdale?
I have not read any Joe R. Lansdale, and I don't know where to start.
Oh, we just
I have not read any.
I go with the Thicket or the Bottoms, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine actually asked that, and I said some people would recommend. I didn't say the Thicket, but I said the Bottom. Someone would say a Drive-In, which is completely wacky. There's 3 books to that. I told him I would start with a short fiction, just to see if you like his voice. But you said that you like reading novels more, so yeah, Kevin's spot on with that. Joe's favorite book he's ever written is Paradise Sky, for whatever that is worth, and that's a standalone. So that's something to consider too.
I have the chapbook that came out from Death's Head Press too. I have that chapbook.
Oh, that one's good. Hey, speaking of that chapbook, I have the same character that's gonna be in the anthology that I edited. It doesn't have a date yet. Should be this summer, but yeah, that's Reverend Mercer. Badass. That chapbook you're talking about, I reread quite a few pages. It's because Joe's got this ability where they're simple words but strung together in the right order, and you just like, ooh, he makes it so easy. It's not easy to write that good. So yeah, I think you should read that one since you have it. It's fucking good, man. Where can people follow you, John? Sorry, I threw myself off.
Oh, you were what you were reading? I think we were right there, right?
No, I'm good. I already went through mine, and then Brennan did his. Unless I cut you off.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Where can people follow you?
I have Goldfish Brain, so.
Oh, it's all good.
You could. I have Goldfish Brain. I don't remember anything after seconds. So you can find me. I have to look at my social media because they're not all the same. You can find me at John Lynch Books if you're on Twitter. On Facebook, it's John Lynch. I have an author page and a personal page. If you want to follow me on either of those, you can. The personal page is probably updated more than the author page, so that'd be the best bet. But I try to post on both of those. On TikTok, I don't even know why I'm on TikTok. It's John Lynch Horror on TikTok. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can also find me at. It's sad that I don't know my own social media is John Lynch Books on Instagram. I changed that, and then my website, johnlynchbooks.com. it links to my shop there as well. I have a shop that's run separately through Big Cartel. That's like it's johnlynchbooks.bigcartel.com. But my actual website, johnlynchbooks.com, will link to that as well.
Nice.
So you can find it through all of those.
Okay. Kevin, where can people follow you? So weird to ask that right now.
You can't now.
They can't right now. It's okay.
I'm following you though. I'm actually right outside the window.
GPS. Brendan, where can people follow you on social media?
Just did you add that in there so I wouldn't give a smart ass answer? Thank you. All right. Brendan LaFaro on everything. If you can't find it under that username, I'm not on that one.
You can follow me at PR McDonough on Twitter, and if you want to follow the show, we're on a bunch of different platforms. Just look up Dead Headspace. There won't be another one. Final thoughts, John?
What's the R stand for? PR?
My middle name, Robert.
Nice.
I was going to say Ralph. I don't know
I
why. I default to Ralph. I always default to Ralph.
I think Brendan gave him shit one time about Robert R. McCammon, the Pat R.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have a funny joke to follow that up with. So, John, what's your final thoughts?
My final thoughts. If you read The Warrior Retreat, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I'm still glad that you took a chance on it. And you read it. Same thing goes for my collection, whether you've read it or not. If you guys wanted to check it out, let me know about it. I appreciate everybody who has read it, or it's given me a chance to entertain them with my stories, and just keep reading and talking about books, because everything is crazy right now. We all know that, and just I don't know about you guys, but I know that reading and writing takes me away from a lot of the crap going on right now. So reading and telling people about the books that you like is the best way that you can do to support any author. And just try not to take everything so as seriously if it doesn't need to be taken seriously. Enjoy life a little bit when you get a chance to.
I'm laughing because a lot of people on social media can take that advice to heart, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we all can too. I've been
Sure.
there, and I'm
Sure.
just like, this isn't real life. I need to stop worrying about it so much. I need to enjoy my life.
Agreed. Kevin, any final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I just want to suggest that anyone listen to this, pick up John's book and read it. There was a time that my word mattered on these matters on Twitter. And I haven't done my top 5 novels of the year, but off the top of my head, it was definitely top 3 for me, and it's a debut. So that means something. I read, I think 150 plus books last year, and this was definitely my top 3 of independent horror novels. And I call it a novel. It's 182 pages. I back and forth on that. Anything under 150 for me is a novella. But yeah, it was up there. Along with if you're watching this podcast, I assume you read a lot of the same stuff we do. But that means it was right there behind Lily by Daniel Barnett. And if you haven't read that series, that's a part 6. So it's hard to sell 6 volumes, but that part 6 is a masterpiece. And John's book was right there. So you should pick it up and read it for sure.
Saving you for last, Brennan. Yeah, definitely piggybacking on Kev. Warrior Retreat. Yeah, I messaged John, and I wasn't sure if he was going to be like, "Oh, thanks, jackass," but I was like, "Man, you can write." I said something like that because, I've never read anything by you before, and whether it's indie or mainstream or whatever, you just never know what you're going to get with a new writer. So I'm planning on continuing to read your stuff, man. I appreciate you being here. I'm pretty sure it was
having me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like season 1. I was like, "Hey, you want to come on?" And I think you didn't obviously have anything out then, so I'm definitely glad that you're finally made it, man.
It would have just been us just awkwardly staring at each other probably without what to talk about. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about my books, and I think at the time maybe I don't know if we would have been talking about Brennan's books yet. I don't think Slattery Falls had come out yet.
Nope.
No, not yet.
That's a good point.
At the time, yeah. So
I don't know
what we
books
would have
out
talked
either.
about.
So, Just talking about where we grew up. I mean, Brendan pretty
Yeah.
much grew up in Rhode Island. You grew up in
Talking
Rhode
about North.
Island. And I
Talk
grew up
about the East
about,
Coast a little bit.
yeah, I grew up 30 minutes away from
Yeah.
Providence.
Pat texted me today, and I got a new phone yesterday, and it's all about fresh starts. So I didn't keep any of my contacts or anything, you know. And Pat texted me. I was like, "Is this Pat or is this John?" Because I knew that I'd given both y'all my phone number.
Yeah.
He's like, "It's Pat. It's the Boston area code." I was like, "You guys all live in the same part of the world, as far as I'm concerned. You're all up there in the northeast corner of the country." So, but yeah,
Bunch of Yankee boys. Brendan, final thoughts, sir.
Obviously, I want to thank John for taking the time to come hang out with us on a Monday night. Like we said, long overdue. We might not have had anything to talk about, but I'm glad we finally got you on. And I would absolutely recommend people go check out the Warrior Retreat. They should check out. I think we referenced your collection like 20 times, and I don't think anybody said the title. It is called "Woe to Those Who Dwell on Earth." People should check that out. Kevin, I appreciate you coming out of hiding to hang out with us for a little bit.
no
And
problem.
Patrick, I would appreciate it if you didn't message guests to say, "Wow, you can write." So, please refrain from doing that in the future. That's going to lose us some guests, man.
All right. I did not say it like that.
Yeah, you know what? Before we cut off here, too, I just wanted to say again, I wanted to thank you guys for having me, and thank you for Kevin for joining us, because I know you kind of went incognito online for a little bit, so you definitely didn't have to show up for this. So I'm glad that you did.
Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
Next episode is 189 with Mariana. Can't talk. With Mariana Enriquez, with guest hosts Paul Tremblay and John Langan. Stay tuned for that.